Hello, everyone. I am Mohammed Tavakkoli, the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto. I welcome you all to another exciting session of the Institute's lecture series on Persian language pedagogy, new trends and innovations, which is jointly organized in collaboration with the University of Chicago's Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilization and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and the University of Toronto's Department of Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations. I'm grateful to University of Toronto's Professor Azita Talaqani and Professor Pune Shabani Jadidi of the University of Chicago for co-convening this innovative lecture series. We are grateful to Roshan Cultural Heritage Institute for fully funding the establishment of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto. At the outset, I'd like to express our solidarity with the inspiring women's movement in Iran and our collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land on which the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, and teach on their ancestral homeland. I would like to welcome Dr. Mahbod Ghafari of University of Cambridge to the University of Toronto. My colleague, Professor Talaqani, is introducing Dr. Ghafari. Today's session is moderated by Professor Shabani Jadidi. Dr. Talaqani, please.
Thank you, Professor Tavakkoli. Thank you, everyone, to join us specifically Saturday morning from different parts of the world. I just want to mention that this lecture series, this is the first part of the lecture series that we have in winter 2023. We have another lecture series on Persian second language pedagogy that we already invited and organized that, invited the speaker and organized this lecture for fall 2023. And also, I wanted to say that the papers which are presented in this lecture series, in both lecture series, will be published by Routledge on specific volume on Persian second language pedagogy, new trends and innovations. So it would be my pleasure to introduce and welcome Dr. Mahbod Ghafari from University of Cambridge to the University of Toronto. Dr. Ghafari is Associate in Persian Language and Culture at the University of Cambridge. He received his MA in teaching Persian and PhD in linguistics in Iran, and he has a certificate in leadership in higher education from the University of Oxford. Professor Ghafari has taught Persian language and culture, Iranian cinema, linguistics, methodology, and translation at different universities since 1998. Dr. Ghafari has written several books and articles on teaching Persian and presented a number of papers at conferences. He has published Farsi Biamuzi, Let's Learn Persian series in 5 levels. First edition published 2000 to 2003, and the second edition published 2017 through 2021. He also published Persian for Dummies in 2018, and he developed a website for teaching Persian language online, which is a 3-level interactive online Persian program developed from 2013 to 2015. My friend and colleague, Professor Pune Shabani Jadidi, will moderate today's session on grammaticalization of Dāshtan. We will appreciate if you save or keep your question and comments for the end of the lecture. We do not want to have any interruption in the speaker's talk. Then either you can visually raise your hand in Zoom or write your question and comments in chat, and Professor Shabani Jadidi read it. Welcome, Dr. Ghafari, to our lecture series and to the University of Toronto.
Many thanks, Azita Jan, for your nice introduction. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Elahé Omidyar Jalali, Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies, University of Toronto, and University of Chicago. Also, Dr. Pune Shabani, Dr. Azita Talaqani, and Professor Tawakkoli for convening this lecture series, and also for inviting me to be part of your great initiative. So let me share my PowerPoint to you. So as you see, I'm going to talk about grammaticalizations of Dashtan. And then why I chose this one, because it is Dashtan is an exceptional verb because of its behavior. There are different unusual grammatical and semantic behaviors of this verb, which make it very exceptional. And at the same time, it is difficult for the learners to master this verb. The complexity and different behavior of this verb can be a result of the process of grammaticalizations, in my view. Okay. So as you know, Dashtan and Budan are considered as exceptional verbs in Persian in traditional grammar books. And then we know that Dashtan is one of the most frequent verbs in Persian, and not only used as simple transitive verb, but it is also used as verb or part of compound verbs. Further, this verb is used as an auxiliary verb to underline the progressive and prospective aspects, particularly in the spoken Persian. Here are the examples that you can see. So, as a simple verb, خواهرم یک دوچرخه دارد, and as part of compound verbs in different verbs such as دوست داشتن, باز داشتن, تمرکز داشتن, ترک برداشتن, and you can just name them. So it is very frequent as a verbal element in compound verbs, and also it is used as an auxiliary verb like داشتم غذا میپختم که تلفن زنگ زد, و از ترس داشتم میمردم. So in the first one, when we say داشتم غذا میپختم, it shows the progressive aspect, and in the second one it is showing the, sorry, in the first one it is the continuous or progressive aspect, but in the second one it is a prospective aspect of the verb. It seems that its usage to indicate progressive and prospective aspects are more frequent in the spoken Persian, though its appearance in written Persian has gradually increased. However, it seems that unusual and exceptional behavior of Dashtan is, in cases like this, it is used as a simple verb, it is used as simple verb or as part of the compound verbs that we have those exceptional behaviors of Dashtan. Okay, so before we start, it is good to define some of the linguistic terms. So the first one, that is the main thing we want to talk about, is grammaticalization. So grammaticalization in general is a process where a lexical item, so we can call it a content word, loses its semantic features, and then it changes to a function word or to a grammatical item. So for example, in Persian, باید and شاید are the true examples of grammaticalization. Because they have lost a main function as the main verb that was used before and changed to a modal verb to trigger subjunctive. This process happens gradually and through time. So it doesn't happen just in one go. Hopper and Troger in 1993 considered grammaticalization as a continuum. So at one end, you have the lexical items. On the other end, you have the inflectional affixes. And in between, you have those grammatical items, you have clitics and other forms of grammatical morphemes there. But so it is a continuum that we have in the process, or sometimes they call it a climb. The next thing that I want to talk about is auxiliation. Auxiliation is just one particular form of grammaticalization. So in this form of grammaticalization, just a lexical item changes to an auxiliary verb to show aspect, mood, or tense. For example, in case that we have with Dāshtan as auxiliary verb, that is the kind of grammaticalization we have. The other thing that I want to talk about is the image schemata. So the image schemata, actually, these are abstract images which are formed in our mental cognition based on our experience from the interaction with the world around us, our movement, body movement, working with objects, all those things that we do in our life. It helps us to make those abstract images in our brain. It is due to abstract entity of image schemata that we can have indefinite understanding using comparative method. It is because of this image schemata that we can understand metaphorical meanings. And then when we go further, when we talk about Dāshtan, we will see what image schematas work on the verb to have, or Dāshtan in Persian. The other thing that I want to talk about is the previous studies done on the verb to have and grammaticalization. As you know, in traditional grammarians and later linguists have worked on the verb Dāshtan. They mentioned Dāshtan in their grammar books or in the papers. So I just focus on the modern linguists, and the first one is Jahanpanah Tehrani. In 1984, she studied Dāshtan as an auxiliary verb, and the two aspects it indicates as prospective and progressive. So she just mentioned that one as auxiliary verb. Farshid Ward in 2003 talked about exceptional behavior of Dāshtan is subjunctive and imperative. And then Estaji in 2007 briefly talked about semantic bleaching of Dāshtan when the function changes from indicating position into indicating aspect. Then later, Naghzgul Kohan, 2008, and then more recently, Naghzgul Kohan and Davari, they talked about grammaticalization of Dāshtan just as what is that? Lexical item changing to using as an auxiliary verb. And also, then we have Rasikh Mahand in 2009 and 2022. He talks about aspectual verbs in general and aspectual verb constructions. And he refers to grammaticalizations, just refers to the grammaticalization and aspectual function of Dāshtan. And then Ne'matullahi in 2018 studied progressive aspect of Dāshtan, never mentioned grammaticalization, and then she moved to the counterpart of Dāshtan in Mazandarani or Mazani dialect. So this is the review of literature that we have done. But the things that we cannot see in these works is that they never talked about Dāshtan as a compound verb. They never talked about different behaviors of that one, and they never talked about what are the main reasons for different behaviors, semantic and grammatical behaviors of the verb Dāshtan that we want to focus on here. Okay. So now let's go to the exceptions of Dashtan. So let's have a few examples here. We know that Dashtan is a transitive verb. Sorry, if in the abstract it was saying intransitive. It is not by mistake. So Dashtan is a transitive verb when it is a simple verb. So we know that in all transitive verbs, when we want to show the progressive aspect, then they take me. Sometimes even in indicative, they take me too for present tense. So like we see that for Dashtan, it is exceptional. Grammatically, it doesn't take the me. So برادرم الان کتاب می‌دارد is not correct. And then, for example, in the next one, which is not what is that? It is not progressive anymore. برادرم هر روز به کلاس می‌رود, which is more habitual. Again, Dashtan avoids taking the me. So برادرم هر روز کلاس می‌دارد is wrong. And when we have as subjunctive, شاید امتحان بگیرم, for other transitive verbs, we just add the be to the root of the verb and then we conjugate it, شاید امتحان بگیرم, but that is not possible for the verb داشتن. شاید امتحان بداریم is not possible for the verb داشتن. And the same is for imperative. So فعلا این پول را بشمار, again be plus the root of the verb, but this doesn't work with the verb داشتن. فعلا این پول را بدار. So we see that داشتن is different from the other verbs. It seems to me that there are semantic things, semantic features of Dashtan that works differently from other simple transitive verbs. We know that in lots of things, it is the same. For example, we can conjugate it regarding the persons and numbers in present, past, and future, but still, there are a couple of exceptions that we saw here regarding the aspect and regarding subjunctive and imperative. So for me, it seems that Dashtan doesn't have that action meaning, and it is a kind of static or non-kinematic meaning there that doesn't let Dashtan work like other transitive verbs. Here we have a possessor, and then that possessor merely doesn't do any action in order to experience something. Let's go to other group of examples. So this was for simple verbs. When it is a verbal element in compound verbs. So these are the examples that I have here. از دانشجوی سال اول چه توقعی داری؟ باید تمرکز داشته باشید. از من انتظار نداشته باش. And then a few more. در دانشگاه ماسکم را بر نمیدارم. and میتوانم این ترم درس جدیدی بردارم. We said that Dashtan is very common in as verbal elements in constructing compound verbs, but you see that usually in just three exceptions, it works as a normal like a normal verb. So you see that in the last two examples, در دانشگاه ماسکم را بر نمیدارم. Here we have a compound verb, but you have the me, so that is the exception there. But in the top three ones, از دانشجوی سال اول چه توقعی داری? In that one, you do not say از دانشجوی سال اول چه توقعی میداری. So توقع داشتن as a compound verb, it has the same behavior as داشتن had as a simple verb, but in some other, just in three exceptions, نگه داشتن, برداشتن, یا بازداشتن, we see that it doesn't follow the way it was doing before. if I just go back to that first one, as دانشجوی سال اول چه توقعی داری, we see that this has changed through time. That me, that is not the me, which is the prefix for progressive, or for imperative. So that doesn't come there. But before we had this one, for example, we say مگذران روز سلامت به ملامت حافظ چه توقع ز جهان گذران می‌داری. So we see that 900 years ago, sorry, in the 18th century, the می‌داری was used there, and so we have the prefix me. But in other verbs, still it is different. So we want to know what's happening here. It seems that there is another and further process of grammaticalization here, where Dāshtan has gone through semantic bleaching. I mean, when I have برداشتن, بازداشتن, and نگه داشتن. So here you have a semantic bleaching, means Dāshtan has lost its function semantically and grammatically, and the meaning of the non-verbal element has governed the whole compound verb, and semantically has the verb under its impact. So Dāshtan doesn't have the meaning of, doesn't have that possession meaning anymore. So it is bleached completely. Let me go to another example. So that is one more for you. So the last one that Pune may like it more than others. So we see that even when we use the compound verb برداشتن and compound it with another non-verbal element to make a new compound verb, such as ترک برداشتن, or in some other words, verbs like دست برداشتن, it still keeps its same characteristic, and the progressive aspect and subjunctive imperative forms are formed like any other verb. به سراغ من اگر میایید نرم آهسته بیایید مبادا که ترک بردارد, and then you go on like that. So the subjunctive is like a normal subjunctive of any other verbs here. Okay, let me go to the next part. So another exception is the verb دوست داشتن. So let's have a look at these examples. So today we say تو را دوست دارم. In some styles, still some people, maybe more in the writing, not in the spoken Persian, they use تو را دوست می‌دارم. So you have that prefix me here, and then in the last one, برای اینکه در زندگی خوشبخت باشید باید خودتان را دوست بدارید, subjunctive, or داشته باشید. So we see that دوست داشتن, so داشتن in this verb, or دوست داشتن in general, doesn't follow, or it is something in between. So it seems that the grammaticalization has not been completed. So among the compound verbs, it seems that still some users or speakers of Persian use me to make the progressive aspect of دوست داشتن, and the prefix be before the present root of the verb داشتن to make imperative and subjunctive forms of دوست داشتن, though it is of a very low frequency and in some specific types of Persian, like literary genre. So the process of grammaticalization, as I said, has not been completed in this compound verb. So it hasn't gone to the full stage of grammaticalization and the bleaching. The next series of exceptions are with the auxiliary verb of the usage as auxiliary verb. So again, the same two examples we had in the beginning. داشتم غذا میپختم که تلفن زنگ زد, and از ترس داشتم میبردم. As an auxiliary verb, داشتن has lost its lexical meaning possession in the process of grammaticalization, and it is used as a grammatical element to show the progressive and prospective aspects of other verbs. It is special to spoken Persian, but as I said before, it entered Persian writing about a century ago. And now it is one of the most frequent usages of this verb. This aspect can be used both for present and past tense. So here we have the past tenses, but easily you change it in the present and you say as tars daram mimiram and daram غذا میپزم. So in these examples, Dāshtan has no other function and meaning except its grammatical function as an auxiliary verb. And the semantic feature of the verb, such as being instantaneous or achievement or durative, is the key factor of the type of verb aspect. So if it is durative, so it is a progressive aspect in the first example. If it is achievement or instantaneous, then it is a second example, as tars داشتم میمردم. However, since the verb داشتن is conjugated regarding the person and number and works independently, we may conclude that the process of grammaticalization of داشتن as an auxiliary verb is not completed yet. So we know that here داشتم, it is for present tense, it is for first person singular, and then you have داشتی, داشت, داشتیم, داشتی, داشتن, and then the main verb again conjugates the same way. داشتی غذا میپختی, داشت غذا میپخت. So because the داشتم is conjugating, so it hasn't gone through the complete grammaticalization. So it is different from باید and شاید, that there is no conjugation anymore when we use them for triggering subjunctive. Now I have a few more examples. The first two, which are grammatically wrong, برادرم دارد دو تا کیف می دارد. وقتی تلفن کردی داشتیم تمرکز می داشتیم. And the second two examples, which are perfectly fine, داشتم بچه را نگه می داشتم and دارم کم کم او را دوست می دارم. It should be noted that it is not possible to use داشتن as an auxiliary verb with داشتن as the main verb or as a verbal element of compound verbs. So the first two examples, you have برادرم دارد, here the دارد is the auxiliary verb, دو تا کیف می دارد, again داشتن as the main verb, a simple main verb, and when you have both of them at the same time, it makes the sentence ungrammatical. And in the second example, وقتی تلفن کردی داشتیم, auxiliary verb, and تمرکز می داشتیم, together, داشتیم is the compound verb, verbal element in the compound verb تمرکز داشتن. Again, it is ungrammatical because we have the two forms or the two functions of auxiliary and part of verbal element. So that cannot come together. But then again, we come back to those three exceptional verbs of داشتن, نگه داشتن, باز داشتن, بر داشتن, and even دوست داشتن, which is still in a limbo situation. داشتم بچه را نگه می داشتم and دارم کم کم او را دوست می دارم. So you see that in these few compounds, still we can use progressive aspect and the verbal element of the compound verbs. Let me go on. Oh, sorry, back. دیروز ساعت 10 غذا نمیخوردم. دیروز ساعت 10 داشتم غذا نمیخوردم. دیروز ساعت 10 نداشتم غذا میخوردم. So when we look at these three questions, the three sentences, the last two ones are again ungrammatical. So that is the final point here, that we use داشتن as an auxiliary verb to show the aspect. When we use that, then neither the main verb nor the auxiliary verb can be negated. Therefore, we need to use the unmarked construction of progressive aspect using the prefix me if we want to make negative form. So the first one is fine because we are using unmarked progressive aspect using the prefix me. The next two ones are ungrammatical because we cannot have auxiliary verb داشتن and make the sentence in a negative form. As I promised, I'm going to just talk about a few, just talk briefly about the Dashtan and the image schemata. Okay. The most common meaning of Dashtan as the main verb is the ownership of something. However, it had some other types of meaning which have been stopped to some extent, except few of them. So, دوچرخه دارم، ماشین دارم، بچه دارم، all of them, we know that it is a kind of ownership there. So in general, I refer to the whole thing as belonging or possession schema. But as I said before, Dashtan had other meanings, so action ones. For example, I have an example from بیهقی, meaning طول کشیدن. بسیار مردم گرد آمدندی و جنگ ریشاریش کردندی و 4 روز آن جنگ بداشت و هر روز کار سخت‌تر بود. When it says 4 روز آن جنگ بداشت, this داشتن is طول کشیدن, so it is one of those kinematic meanings of Dashtan, that it was bleached through the time. So we may be able to say that because of the experience of possession and ownership, that something belongs to us, an image schema has been formed in our mental cognition, which can be named belonging or possession image schema. This image schema starts and develops since birth, when we recognize ourselves and the things we have, like our body parts, the things around us, parents, toys, etc. So this cognition of having things covers range of things that at one end is ownership, and on the other end, things that we have for a very short period, or ranges from concrete things to more abstract things. It is based on the formation of this image schema through physical possession that we are able to apply it and understand more abstract concepts such as job or thought in sentences like, not this sentence, sorry, I do not have that sentence. For example, when I say, این دانشجو فکر بازی داره یا فکر روشنی داره. So I use داشتن in an abstract concept. So referring to working with فکر and thought. And then the next example, when I say آقای احمدی کار نداره or شغل نداره, again, this داشتن is more abstract. And the only way we understand and we are able to understand these two sentences is when we have the image schema. So now I have a few more examples. برادرم ماشین دارد. این میز 4 پایه دارد. این میز 4 پایه دارد. یک خواهر و یک برادر دارم. کمی تب دارم. As you see, this possession schema has different types, so it ranges of different types. So when we, in the first example, we have ownership image schema, someone owns something, and the other one is part whole image schema, and the next one is the kinship image schema, and the last one, which is a compound verb, tab داشتن, then that is the effect image schema. So somebody's experiencing something and the fever has some impact on the that grammatical subject that is me. So I want to go to the next one. این کتاب را دوست دارم. We were talking about that دوست داشتن before, that is a little bit different from other compound verbs. because it has frequently used through time, the possession meaning of Dāshtan has been bleached to a great extent and has lost its metaphorical entity, and the entire compound works as one linguistic unit, and it is considered based on the desired image schema. So you see that in the last example, we do not consider it as belonging a schema anymore, because Dāshtan has lost all its meaning of possession, and Dūst Dashtan in total has gotten another meaning, and it goes under desire or interest image schema. So the first thing is when as a teacher we do the teaching, and as a learner we have to be careful of this verb Dāshtan, and particularly we should avoid overgeneralization when we are learning the simple verbs in present tense and in progressive, both in present and past progressive. Then that me is used with all verbs but not with Dāshtan. So we have to be careful of that one. How as a teacher we should deal with these in order to stop our students to do that overgeneralization. So I personally think that if we teach the verb as a simple transitive verb, past and present, that is the main thing. So just teach Dāshtan, Dāram, and just before teaching any other things. And then when you taught Dāshtan, and it depends on your style, if you want to teach present first or past first, so just go on. But after you taught these things, just introduce a few more verbs in present tense or past tense. And then when you teach these 2-3 new verbs like khordan, khandan, the most frequent verbs, then refer to Dāshtan and talk about Dāshtan and check with the students that this doesn't take me. So when they have mastered those few examples, then you can introduce more verbs in present tense. And then after that, introduce other compound verbs with Dāshtan, and then before you go to baz Dāshtan, bar Dāshtan, or negah Dāshtan, teach other compound verbs, except Dūst Dashtan that I personally teach it very beginning of a beginner class. So I don't go to compound verbs or even to lots of simple verbs before teaching Dūst Dashtan. So I teach Dūst Dashtan very beginning. So Dāram, Dāshtam, then introducing Dūst Dāram, Dūst Dashtan, and then I introduce other verbs usually. And then go on teach progressive aspect after ensuring learners are confident to use present and past tense. So do not mix them up. So let them learn simple past, then go to simple past, Dāshtan, and then move to the progressive aspect. And then, as we all know, so teaching imperative and then subjunctive, we teach them at a later stage, and we do not rush teaching the exceptional verbs of Budan and Dāshtan. Keep in mind that meaning is the main factor of different behavior of Dāshtan, particularly a main reason for process of grammaticalization. So for me, those tarvareha, or the image schemas, are the most important things, and that meaning of possession, which is bleached, is the main thing, which is we know that semantic bleaching is just one line of grammaticalization. If that doesn't happen, then we do not have these different exceptional behaviors of Dāshtan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mahbod Jan. It was an excellent presentation. And I'm sure that everybody enjoyed it. And I think everybody has a lot of questions. But let me just, in order to wrap up and in order to remind the audience of the points that you mentioned, I'm just going to go over them a bit quickly. So you talked about Dāshtan. Dāshtan as a simple verb, Dāshtan as an element or constituent of a compound verb, and Dāshtan as an auxiliary verb. Then you talked about grammaticalization process and how a content or lexical word becomes a function word. You mentioned 2 examples, bayad and shayad. You talked about auxiliation, and you said a lexical item becomes an auxiliary in case of Dāshtan. You mentioned image schemata and cognitive schemata. And then you went through the previous studies, existing previous studies on Dāshtan, and then you added that your own contribution to these previous studies is that you're going to highlight the semantic and the grammatical behavior of Dāshtan. And in the previous studies done, there is not like one study that is dedicated to the semantic and grammatical behavior of Dāshtan per se. And then you finished your talk by teaching Dāshtan that avoid generalization, and then you suggested when we should teach Dāshtan as an auxiliary and Dāshtan as the main verb and other verbs. I have a lot of questions myself, but I think I would like to ask the audience first, and then I will come back if we have time.
Just to mention something, in the main thing that the other works have not done, either they have worked on just one part of the Dāshtan, just Dāshtan on its own, Dāshtan for subjunctive and subjunctive and imperative, auxiliary. But the main thing is that they never talked about, they didn't go to Dāshtan as a compound verb. So that is where usually they lack, or usually people, what is that? It is easy to do the easier way to do just as a simple verb, as possession, and not touching other forms of Dāshtan as a verbal element of compound verbs.
Well, we can't wait to read your paper. Thank you, Mahbod Jan.
Yeah.
Yes, Mahbod, you can go ahead.
من میخواستم راجع به فعل داشتن از simple verb صحبت بکنم که داشتن میتونه هم transitive به کار برده بشه و هم intransitive. مثلا این مثالایی که آقای دکتر محبود دادن، برادرم ماشین دارد. آیا اینجا میتونیم بگیم که دارد ترانزیتیوه یا این میز 4 پایه دارد؟ در حالی که میتونیم بگیم for example من 4 روز آن مغازه را داشتم و سپس آن را پس دادم. میخواستم ببینم آقای دکتر راجع به این مسئله ترانزیتیو و اینترانزیتیو بودن فعل داشتن، فعل سیمپل داشتن چه نظری دارن؟ ممنون میشم.
خواهش میکنم. فعل داشتن 100% یک فعل متعدی یا ترانزیتیوه، همیشه یک فعل 2 ظرفیتیه. شما حتما یک دونه سابجکت میخواید براش و یک دونه آبجکت میخواید براش، چه در مثال هایی که شما خودتون فرمودید چه در مثال هایی که من زدم. در تمامی این موارد داشتن فعل از سیمپل ورب یک فعل متعدی به حساب میادش. فقط شما تفاوتتون این هستش که وقتی در object position یک دونه noun رو قرار میدید، این noun شما، این اسمی که شما میارید، اگر specific یا definite باشه، شما حتما اون object marker رو برای، چون یه direct object هستش، رو باید بیارید. اما در نمونه هایی که من آوردم در تمام مواردشون همشون non specific non definite بودن، بدون رو آوردم.
بله بله، مرسی، خیلی ممنون. ولی در مورد این میز 4 پایه دارد یا برادرم ماشین دارد، میتونیم بگیم که این میز 4 پایه است.
اون وقت دیگه فعل داشتن
داشتن دیگه نیستش. دوباره برمیگردم به همین ترانزیتیو و اینترانزیتیو بودن فعل داشتن و اون این که مثلا میگیم به کسی علاقه داشتن، که در اینجا در حقیقت ما ایندایرکت سابجکت به کار میبریم. ولی اگر بگیم او را دوست داشتم، این دایرکت ناونی که به کامپاوند ورب اضافه میشه علاقه داشتن و دوست داشتن، دوست و علاقه است که نوع سابجکت ما را عوض میکنه، یعنی دیرکت آبجکت رو تبدیل به این دیرکت آبجکت میکنه.
خیلی ممنون خانم محبد جان. تو هر دو تا مثالی که زدید ما فعل داشتن رو به عنوان یک کامپاوند داریم.
کامپاوند به کار بردیم. بله.
اولین مثالتون دوست داشتن بود، این یک کامپاوند وربه. این کامپاوند ورب من در این مثال، در این کامپاوند ورب من یک ترانزیتیو ورب هستش و به خاطر همین یه دونه سابجکت شما دارید، یه دونه آبجکت. اما در مثال دومی که فرمودید علاقه داشتن در اصل هستش به علاقه داشتن، یک کامپاوند دیگه هستش که شما در این کامپاوند شما یک ناون فریزی دارید، در اصل یک ناونی دارید علاقه به اضافه داشتن که کل این حتما یه دونه پریپوزیشن به رو نیاز داره که همراهش بیاد، یا به قول شما نوع دیگه اگر نگاهش کنیم وقتی که شما میخواید آبجکت بیارید یه این دایرکت آبجکت میارید بعد از پریپوزیشن به و در اصل کل محصول ما، کل فعل مرکب ما یه دونه این ترانزیتیو ورب خواهد بودش. این ترانزیتیو وربی که مفعول مستقیم یا اون دایرکت آبجکت رو دیگه نمیتونه بگیره، تنها راهش اینه که با اون پروپوزیشن به بیادش. ولی ماجرامون کلا وقتی ما به کامپاوند میرسیم متفاوت میشه با داشتن به عنوان یک سیمپل.
بله، و اون ناونه که تغییرش میده از دیرکت سابجکت به این دیرکت آبجکت و بله دیرکت آبجکت. بله خیلی ممنون. مرسی.
دقیقاً اون علاقه به
چیزی
علاقه هستش، مال داشتن.
بله بله بله. مرسی آقای دکتر.
خیلی ممنون از سوالتون. آزیتا جان شما میتونید بفرمایید سوالتون.
خیلی ممنون، متشکرم. Mahbod, I really enjoy your talk because I remember once when I was in graduate school, I had a paper in possessive, but not really in broad topic that you talk about that. My question, although I have another question that I prefer to do it after other people ask their question. You talked about the stages that you teach Dāshtan, different form of Dāshtan to students, and you mentioned that you prefer to teach Dāshtan when you compare with other compound verbs earlier than others. My question is that, so if you just focus on Dāshtan and do not go with negah Dāshtan, bar Dāshtan, this kind of exceptional form of compound verb with Dāshtan, how do you justify for students that when we have the simple verb like Dāshtan does not have me as a habitual or continuous marker, how you justify at the beginning stage when you go for دوست داشتن, how we have a دوست می‌دارم here while we do not have it when we have, because you want to present this earlier than you go with other compound verbs. How you describe it for students?
Thanks, Azita Jan. When I use the داشتن as a simple verb, so I teach دارم، چی داری، کتاب دارم، تو کیف چی داری, and then we go on. And then the next stage we go to دوست داشتن, and usually we use it as a generic things. Even we do not go as I don't go it for specific things. I don't use the raw with داشتن first as a فوتبال دوست دارم، کباب دوست دارم, whatever you like. So as a generic thing. The other thing is that I never mention those I never mention the less frequent usage of دوست داشتن because they are very stylistic and they are not very frequent. So I never talk about دوست می‌دارم. So it is not one of the things I cover. So I leave it to the time that they go to intermediate level, when they see different genres and styles of Persian writing. And if they see that one, then we mention it. If not, we just leave it. We don't, I personally do not teach the Dāshtan, induce Dāshtan with me, because I know that that is very end of its life. It is the end of the process of grammaticalization, even if it hasn't gone to the end, but still it is it is the last part. So I am just waiting for that to finish, and hopefully in the next 50 years there is no me in any writing with دوست می داشتم or دوست بدارید, inshallah. Usually those people who want to be different, they bring this me because of the, what is that, historic usage of the me in دوست داشتن, دوست می داشتن. And usually I see that in, unfortunately, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately, sometimes you see that Iranian movies, Iranian series, there are kind of historic ones, and then they change the language to a very, what is that, artificial language, and then they bring these kind of things, and it becomes for a while popular among people, then it fades when the TV series finishes. That is usually happening these days, and I think we will not see it anymore in near future.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Azita-jan. Because my question is a follow-up to Azita's question, so I'm going to go next if you permit me. So you said verbs such as دوست داشتن and a few others, sometimes you refer to them as exceptions, and that's why they don't take me. But I remember you also mentioned that perhaps these verbs are not completely semantically bleached. And then I was thinking, you know, we have a verb in English like to hold dear. And then I said, okay, that is like in Persian, we say aziz dashtan. چیزی را عزیز داشتن, چیزی را دوست داشتن, علاقه داشتن, right? So we don't say علاقه می دارم or عزیز می دارم unless it's archaic. So would you say that these are exceptions, or would you say that these are perhaps these are not completely semantically bleached because there is kind of, you hold something dear, you hold the interest, right? So there's a kind of semantic load to these words, to these compound verbs.
Actually, those are not the exceptions. The exceptions are just نگه داشتن, باز داشتن, برداشتن. So those عزیز داشتن, علاقه داشتن, توقع داشتن, آرزو داشتن, all of them are normal. The exceptions for us are those that are that do not follow the other verbs, okay? Like نگه داشتن, برداشتن, باز داشتن. And دوست داشتن is going to be one of them, yeah? I'm sorry, دوست داشتن is going to be the other side, going to the full grammaticalization. The main reason is that the more the word is used, it is more probable that it goes through the process of grammaticalization. So grammaticalization usually happens because of a word or a phrase or a linguistic item is used more and more and more and more. When that happens, you go through that grammaticalization. That is what happened with bayad, with shayad, with dashtan. Because they are, so there is a kind of, if I talk about the verbs, when we see the top frequent verbs, usually that has happened, that grammaticalization, for the top 3-4 verbs. And then, for example, dashtan is there, khastan is there, bayastan, which was there, bayad and shayad. So, and budan. So these are the exceptions because they are used a lot. دوست داشتن is different from what is that? علاقه داشتن, and it is different from عزیز داشتن because it is used more frequently. Okay? So the more it works, the more it is possible that it goes through that grammaticalization. So and we know that دوست داشتن very soon all its what is that, the all the features will be finished, and then you use just as a normal verb with داشتن. داشته باشم. دوست داشته باشم. دوست دارم. with nomi.
Yes, I understand. But then we have other verbs like چشم داشتن, right? Which is not grammaticalized, but still we wouldn't use me with it, right?
چشم داشتن. Can you give me an example?
Like چشم دارم از همه افزون باشی.
Nomi.
Yeah, there's no me.
There is no me. So it is like the normal, the whole group of compounds verb داشتن. توقع دارم. انتظار دارم. So دوست داشتن is still there and has not joined this one completely. When it does all the grammaticalization done, then دوست داشتن joins this group of verbs with verbal element of داشتن. The only three ones which is left there is برداشتن, بازداشتن, and نگه داشتن.
I see. Thank you, Mahbod. We have a lot of hands up. So I'm going to start with Mr. Momtaz Zadegan.
خیلی ممنون آقای دکتر. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghafari. That was very beneficial for me to listen to your talk. And thank you very much. You explained very well about the exceptions. We know that Dāshtan is not the only word with all these exceptions. There are so many other words also, like من ماشینمو میفروشم و بعدا میگیم ماشینمو فروختم. این شه تبدیل به خ میشه. There are so many words with exceptions, not only in Persian, in other languages as well. My question is that, is this exceptions a strength or enrichment into some language, or is a weakness? What do you think about this?
I can't say well if, because language we usually do not talk about weakness or richness or enrichment. For me, the language is language. So all languages are rich. All languages have exceptions, and that is part of the life of what is that? Something which is alive. Language is changing, and that is part of the nature of language. So for me, on my own, I don't see any weakness or anything added to the language if it has those exceptions or not. So as a linguist, for me, there is no difference, and all languages are the same.
Thank you very much for your question. We have a lot of hands up, so I'm going to go to Karin. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you. My question is on the progressive aspectual use of the Dāshtan. I was wondering, because it is, you're calling them an auxiliary, but they do behave different from the regular auxiliaries like budan, right? Because it's taking its own person and tense along with the main verb, taking person and tense. And it's also adding aspectual information. So I was wondering if you've thought about looking at it as a serial verb rather than an auxiliary, perhaps. I don't know if you've thought about that, or others have talked about that. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that before.
Yeah, the main thing is that Professor Rasakh Mahand is here, that I mentioned about his work in 2022. He talked about the serial verbs there, and Dāshtan, he considers it as I stop here. He's here. Professor Rasakh Mahand, can you please jump in and talk about the Dāshtan as a serial verb? Or is it a serial verb, or it is just auxiliary verb? I know you have done with lots of verbs like گرفتن, رفتن, آمدن, that you worked on them as serial verbs.
But only the progressive use one, right? That's what
no, for serial verbs like the رفتن, گرفتن, آمدن, زدن, they are serial verbs, so they don't
Yeah.
they show different aspects, but they are serial verbs. But those verbs they do not conjugate. So you say زد و لاتری رو بردی.
Yeah, but those are
غذا رو
the
خوردیم رفت.
Yeah.
When you say
Yeah,
غذا رو خوردیم رفت, all of them you do not conjugate it. I hope Muhammad, my friend, comes back and tells us more about it. But
okay.
for the Dāshtan, it is the auxiliary verb. It is the only, even if it is a serial verb, the main difference between Dāshtan and other ones is that it is conjugating. Dr. Rasakhan,
Yeah, but the ones you mentioned have a va in between. That's different from دارم میرم, right? That's different because there's no دارم و میرم نیست. دارم ببخشید. بفهم.
So in my examples, all of them, it shows auxiliary aspect. Progressive aspect and I called it as auxiliary verb. You may call it as a serial verb, but I think Dr. Rasakh Mahand is better here to.
Sorry, may I join?
Yes,
Of course, please.
Okay. But I think my internet is not that stable. But what Mahbod is referring to is a paper which talks about these verbs like گرفتن like بگیر بشین or رفتن like خونه رو فروختم رفت and something like that. My point is that these are not serial verbs, contrary to some other people who thought that they are serial verbs. There I have actually presented some reasons, but the main reason is what I suppose Karin also mentioned, that for two verbs to act as a serial verb, you need one part of the meaning of the verb from each of them. It means if you have two